Hello, my name is Trish Lynch from IOHR in London. Thanks for being with us for another episode of our Human Rights TV. An American journalist and author, Theo Padnos, was kidnapped by Al-Nusra Front, the former affiliate of Al-Qaeda in Syria, in 2012. He was one of the few hostages that survived, while many others were beheaded and killed by ruthless terrorists. It's been almost 4 years since he won his freedom. How does he live his life today after such a horrific experience? Theo, good to have you with us on the show. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, you thankfully were one of the few hostages that managed to survive Al-Qaeda after 2 years in captivity. Tell me how this experience has shaped you and your life, and do you now feel that you have a responsibility to help others in a similar situation?
I certainly feel that, because I know that the group that had me still has tons of people. Many of the people that I was in prison with 4 years ago are still unaccounted for. And so I feel a responsibility towards their families to understand the captors better, so that the families can communicate with the captor. You know, my family was in the same situation as all of these families in Syria are in now, and that their kid is gone, and they're trying to make contact with these lunatics. And, I just want to speak about what's happening there so that we all better understand those lunatics who are kidnapping and killing people.
Tell me what was going through your mind when you were in captivity, tortured, electrocuted almost on a daily basis. How do you keep yourself sane? How do you stay Theo Padnos in your head when you're experiencing that kind of thing?
I'm not sure that I did stay myself. I changed a lot. I was there for almost 2 years. And in my view, they have a particular kind of emotional, you could say spiritual experience that they want you to have. They really want you to stop being yourself and to go into a deep kind of disorientation where you no longer know who you are. Yeah. And at the end of this long period, you wake up and they give you a new identity. In fact, they will give you a new name. They never called me Theo.
What did they call you?
I was Abu Petra. A lot of times I was like animal. You filth. You shut up. You insect. You know, that was the way I was for the first year. And you know, you internalize this kind of abuse. It's like being in an abusive relationship. If you have like a violent, awful husband, drunk or something, he just is cursing you all the time. Eventually, you kind of submit to that psychology.
Breaks you down, yeah.
It breaks you down. You need their food that they're giving you. You know, I needed to be let out of my cell to go to the bathroom. So, you know, I submitted to their insults and their abuse, blah, blah, blah. But eventually, you know, they let off on all of that, and they want you to wake up in the light of their affection and with their own values. And this happens to so many of their prisoners. It happens to their own fighters. This is how they shape loyalty among their own fighters, is they abuse the hell out of these poor people. So these young kids in the West that imagine the fun that they're going to have, a lot of them end up in not a lot, but a certain percentage of the fighters who go to volunteer for them end up in prison because the locals just don't trust them. They say, you come from the spy agency. Mm-hmm. And some of these people have been killed. You know, they go, I don't trust you, you're in touch with the Israelis, boom. We don't hear about those cases, but it does happen. And ISIS has made some videos, by the way, of them killing their own guys. So they're not a trustworthy organization. If you're going to volunteer for somebody, those aren't the people you should be volunteering for.
Many of the captors are young lads. Did you ever get the feeling, after spending time with them, after observing them, after eating with them and having endless conversations with them, did you ever get the feeling that they could potentially be de-radicalized?
Of course.
And that they could leave? Or is that even a possibility?
No, it's a very reversible phenomenon. I always thought that the brainwashing over there was so deep that they would be willing to blow themselves up in a heartbeat, but so shallow that if you gave them something more interesting to do, something more realistic, like have a job in a marketplace in Turkey with some reasonable income and some possibility of the future, they would prefer that to martyrdom and the 72 virgins. But nobody's offering them a reasonable way out. So I think that if it's such a large-scale phenomenon, such a wide, broad base, that in order to, over the long term, in order to diffuse the energy and the violence and the anger, we have to give them a reasonable, realistic way out, and it's not killing them. I mean, we could kill them all, but that's a crime against nature and humanity. It would be a crime against our own sense of ourselves, like just killing a whole generation of Syrians. We don't want to do that on the assumption that maybe someday they will go off and commit acts of terrorism, because I mean, we don't know what so many of these people who belong to these organizations have done in the past. We know they belong now, but we don't know if they've just belonging doesn't necessarily mean they're criminals or have committed crimes. They could just be like followers. So our own laws permit us to forgive people who just join an organization that's bad, but they haven't done anything wrong themselves. We give them a few years in jail and say, come on out. I mean, yeah, I just think that to diffuse the power of these organizations, we need to, first of all, reckon with how large scale the phenomenon is, and then give the people who are within it a way out.
At IOHR, we have an ongoing campaign, Not Born a Radical, which you participated in the other day. What do you think are the vulnerabilities? What do you think is the driving force that sends these young, vulnerable people down this path to violent extremism?
I mean, look, there are a million reasons why people want to join a group. There's the brotherhood, the friendship, the sense of a purpose. Sometimes it's a holy purpose. Once you get there, there's loyalty to the people who are immediately around you. The real mystery in this isn't why people leave, because everyone young people want adventures. And as they were saying in the conference the other day, some people have financial motives and some people are just bored at home. And these explanations are relatively easy to come up with. The mystery for me is they stay there over the years. Why do they stay and how do they change during the stay? This is an area of research or understanding we know nothing about. So I think we must more deeply understand how these groups engender loyalty, how they preserve it, and how they change the psychology of the people who are within the movements and stay there over the long term. Like, I think they have a very deliberate and well-formed, effective, almost industrial scale means of changing the psychology of young people. So we need to understand this more totally. The religion is certainly involved in this. We had some police officers the other day who were saying, well, it doesn't seem to us the religion has any relevance, but it does.
Now, you studied Arabic and you've worked as a journalist in many Middle Eastern countries. That's what drove you to enter Syria in the very first place, in the peak of the uprising. What do you think now needs to happen, especially after the uprooting of ISIS, in order to regain any kind of stability in Syria?
How about schools, roads, electricity,
normality,
clean water?
Yeah,
I mean, the people need to sense that there is a future to be built in that land. And as long as they can only travel from one place to the next, like through a line of craters on a highway that scarcely exists, with cars that have no license plates and windshields, sometimes the cars have no doors. First of all, Jabhat al-Nusra is in control of perhaps 2 million people in the northwestern corner of Syria. And ISIS, I suspect they're in control of considerably larger areas than we know. You would not want to go to certain parts of Syria now and spend the night in the local hotel.
Okay. As
a Westerner, even if it's nominally under the control of so-and-so, because I don't think you're going to wake up in that bed the next morning. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. Much of the geography is under uncertain control. So, but what needs to be done to bring this back? They need civilian infrastructure. They need electricity. They need schools, secular schools. They need running water that they can bathe in and drink from. They need hospitals. They need reliable doctors. Like a lot of these guys that I was with, they were saying, we just use leeches. It says in the Quran, you should draw blood. So we are drawing blood. And this is good and healthy. Well, perhaps it does make them feel a little bit better. They use suction. They put these suction cups on, and so they bleed themselves. And this is their medical treatment for all ailments. They were oftentimes in the prison. We would say, well, we have a lot of lice, or we're feeling, we would have these. Our arms would be really infected with this is going to be gross, but I'll say it anyway. With just these bleeding wounds that came from the lice. So for this, the treatment was
leeches.
No, not leeches. They would just give us a hypodermic needle. Shoot yourself with this. We had no idea what was in it, and treat yourself. And one guy, in fact, in our cell, was a complete fraud, but he goes, "I'm a doctor. I'll do it." We're like, okay. You know, anyway, the medicine is in like the 11th century for them. In order to bring the society back, we should give them, let's say, some 20th century, maybe even 21st century medicine. Why not? Some doctors allow more aid in. You know, the Western countries now are saying we won't give any aid to all those areas that are controlled by the Syrian government, that is the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Well, that affects millions and millions of people that are trying to come back from ISIS. You know, so I say that we should cooperate with the existing authority structure and supply them with proper schools and medicine and roads and electricity. That will help. That will help defeat the fanatics. Yes.
You have said in many of your interviews that you blame yourself partially for being kidnapped in the first place because you were a bit reckless in going into Syria without the correct papers. And you've also said that you plan to go back to help others that are caught up in the same regime. Is this still on the cards, or have you changed your mind?
No. I have not changed my mind. I blame myself entirely.
Entirely?
Yes, okay. I don't blame anybody else but me for getting myself in trouble. But what I hope to do now is to go back to the existing authority structure with the proper papers under a proper visa from the Syrian government. I trust 100% that they will protect me because they have protected all the journalists and are protecting all the journalists who do this. Okay. The journalists who go into the rebel-controlled areas, they often have assurances from the rebels, oh yes, you'll be fine, just come with us and hang out by the pool, it'll be great. And they do go in and, you know, before long they're kidnapped. Because the rebels...
Because Americans are currency, aren't they?
Americans are currency, so are the English, so all Europeans are. But also they have an agenda with us, and the people who imagine them that they are in control, let's say like a moderate rebel, says, I'm in control of this countryside. He thinks he is, but he isn't. And he doesn't know that he isn't. Because there's a larger force nearby that knows what's happening and will come over and pick you up. So it's much too dangerous for journalists to go in. Most of them know this and are not going now. I would never go back to that area, but I do trust the Syrian government. I mean, I trust them to look after the journalists because they have been doing this.
Okay. Now, if I could just ask you this, many governments, as we know, refuse to pay ransom for people who are hostages. The US, the UK and Canada, amongst others.
Right.
What's your take on this?
I think it's, our citizens are being killed because we refuse to make any kind of concession to people who we should be making concession. If they have the gun to your head, I think that we gain more by rescuing that person in that moment of vulnerability, that situation of total peril and jeopardy. We gain more by rescuing those people than we lose by making a few concessions. Sometimes they only want like pickup trucks.
Was there a ransom for you?
I suspect there probably was. I don't know the details, but I suspect it was a big ransom, and I know my mom didn't pay it. They wanted much more money than my mom had. My mom was like, "I'll give you $50,000." No way. That doesn't. They won't walk across the room for $50,000. So yeah, I mean, somebody paid a big ransom for me, and I know these guys well enough to know that they will not answer the phone if there's not a few $1,000,000 in it for them.
So cash is king, really.
We are a Westerner in Jabhat al-Nusra land or ISIS land or in any area that the Syrian government does not control is a walking ATM. And they will take that ATM and they will store it away until such time as they can make their withdrawal.
Now there's this ongoing dialogue about what should happen to returning fighters. Now we know it's a very controversial issue. What do you think is the best approach to deal with these people? You know the mentality, you've lived with them. What's the best way to deal with them?
I think they can be very dangerous. I don't want to say we should like throw a bouquet of roses at them when they return. I also think that the Syrian government is entitled to put those people on trial for crimes they may have committed in Syria. I mean, many young people, like when I was in when I was in Syria, I was interrogated by some young Canadian kids. They had gone there to murder the law enforcement authorities, and they did. Now, I think the families of those law enforcement authorities who were murdered by these young Canadians are entitled to see those those killers brought to justice. So I want some of these people to be returned to Syria to face justice there. I want others who basically I think that these crimes were committed on Syrian soil against Syrians, and I think that the Syrian government should be allowed to deal with them.
Let's talk about your captors. Do you know what's happened to any of them since?
Yeah, they're all on Twitter, they're on Facebook, they're having a lovely time, as far as I can tell, carrying on the jihad in Syria. Some of them are being killed because the Syrian government is bombing them, but most of them know how to avoid the bombs by now. They hide out in bunkers, they go to villages, they go to places that are outside, they go to Turkey. Mm-hmm. You know, they go to places that are safe and they wait until the danger passes, and then they return, and they will return someday to cause the West, their ideology is that we must the West must completely extricate itself from the Arab world. They want a total final divorce. Mm-hmm. They want the unbelievers to remove themselves from, they call it the peninsula of the Arabs, by which they mean Saudi Arabia, and Yemen and Oman and the entire Gulf area. They want us gone, and even Syria they want us gone. I kept telling them, we are part of you and you guys are part of us, and there's a lot of Muslims in the West, a lot of Westerners in the East, and we belong we are married now, we can't divorce. And they're like, no, we want the divorce. We'll keep fighting until such time as there is total separation. So that's their goal, and also they want a caliphate, they want to take over Jerusalem, and they want to bring the fight to the unbelievers in Rome. So, sorry, what was your question? How do we make peace with these guys? We can't. Yeah. We have to live with them because there's so many of them, but we have to deprive them of weapons, because if they have anything more than like a stone, they're going to come and slit your throat. Mm-hmm. So there's a professional jihad culture out there, which I think is worsened when we bomb them. I think it creates larger, it deepens that culture and it expands it. So I don't think bombing is the solution. The solution is to offer those young people that are involved in the thing a better alternative than Allahu Akbar, jihad, jihad, jihad. That's my view.
So after what you've been through, I know you're still working as a journalist, but what's next?
I have a beautiful play that I would like to perform at the Edinburgh Festival. It's all about spiritual experience in Syria now in the time of jihad. And I use the music of the music of the jihad, and some Quran and some film clips that come from Syria, and a script. And I would like to perform this play at the Edinburgh Festival or anywhere. And I have a book that I'm writing about sort of what I lived through, and I also have a novel that I wrote in prison. I got a ton of creative projects.
You've been busy, haven't you?
Well, I also like to ride my bike and goof off, so I've been doing that sort of thing too.
Theo Padnos, thank you for joining us on IOHR. We wish you well.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us on another episode of IOHR TV, putting human rights into focus. Don't forget, you can keep right up to date on our social media feeds and check out other interviews on our website. Until next time, from myself, Trish Lynch, goodbye.